Okay, so I guess we are doing this. It's been a while that I've podcasted actually. So the last time I recorded a podcast, there was none of this as a setup. It used to be in my living room in London or even in my bedroom so that I could really tune out the external noise. So being here today, I feel a tiny bit nervous, but also super excited to be back. So many changes have taken place since I came back to Dubai 2 years ago. I say came back, but actually, I moved to Dubai 2 years ago. And I was living in London for 8 years. And for the last 2 years, there's been so many changes, so much growth, and so many things I feel ready and called to sharing with you right now. And this podcast series is going to delve deeper again into matters of spirituality, health, well being, mental wellness, all of the things that I was always interested in, but we're going to be taking it a lot deeper. So, with this episode in particular, what I felt called to sharing is how we are always going through different seasons in life, right? So, this is a completely new season in my life, having moved countries, starting new things in my career path that 2 years ago I did not expect to be doing. I really didn't see myself having a poetry book launched last year or even doing things like human design readings, which is something that I've been doing more of recently. So there's a lot of exciting changes. And the thing with change is that a lot of times we think that the external change is going to create internal changes. And that could very well be true. External changes do shift our internal world. But what I've come to realize is that regardless of the external changes that take place in your life, regardless of changing jobs or changing relationships or even moving countries, unless there is a conscious shift within yourself, no matter the external change that takes place, it will not stick or it will not have the same effects as though you were to change it from the inside, as though there was this alchemical reaction that has shifted within you, that has taken place within you in order to change. And personally, what I've come to also realize is that taking leaps of faith has been very much my journey for the last 5 years, ever since I quit my corporate job. I believe now it's been since 2019, so 5 years ago. Yeah, 5 years ago. And since then till today, there's been so many leaps of faith. And as a coach, what I do is I really want to guide people towards this place where they feel like they can take the leap, like they feel like it's a possibility for them to dream up a different version of themselves. So, what I want to share with you today is that the biggest leap of faith that you can ever take, the greatest leap of faith that you can ever take, is moving from one way of being to another. It's actually recognizing that, yes, the version of yourself that was there before served you, but there is this trust that there is another version of you in the field of possibilities that you want to call in, that you want to embody more of. For me personally, that's the greatest leap you can take in life. It's not so much about moving countries or changing jobs because, again, how many people do you know that change their jobs and they're still unhappy or they're still miserable? Because it's not the job that is making them miserable, right? You have people that lose themselves when they enter a relationship. They lose sight of who they are or what they want to do or their passions or their purpose because the relationship takes over their lives. And that's definitely happened to me in my journey, that I put aside the things that I love. I put aside things that I actually enjoy doing. And I fall into this trap of prioritizing other people's needs above my own or self sacrificing myself in order to fit in instead of really honoring who I am and who I came here to be and to show up authentically. So I just want you to know that, again, it's beautiful when these external changes happen because it allows you to make certain changes in your life, but to remember that if that doesn't come with an internal shift from within you, then it's not going to have the same effect. And I've learned a lot over the last 2 years. I would say that my biggest lessons have been in really learning to surrender to the flow of life and to have certain visions. Of course, it's important to have vision, it's important to have direction. But again, to understand that with everything that is taking place in our current reality, that the biggest thing that you can do for yourself right now is actually to look within yourself and to see, okay, what are the patterns that I have? Where am I conditioned? What am I looking to break free from? And these questions that you can ask yourself even right now, right? It's important to have these moments of self reflection. And moving from one city to the other, I have to say that Dubai is just as fast as London for me, at least. And in the beginning, it was really hard for me to stay rooted, to stay present. And I think this is why there were a lot of things that I had to press pause on, including podcasting, because it's such a fast paced city and people are always going out and they're always doing things and there's distractions left, right, and center. And whenever you feel like there is something that you're longing for, that there is something that you're seeking for, the best thing to do is actually to close out all of the distractions in your life, to close these tabs, to actually move away from certain relationships and friendships that are not necessarily serving you, from actually releasing certain habits that are not serving you, and to understand why these habits were there in the first place, right? Like, why were you using certain things as a coping mechanism to escape what it is that you're currently feeling? So, this season, really, what I want to explore with solo episodes or even episodes that I will start doing with people is to explore more of our psyche, of our subconscious, because personally something that I have done over the last 10 years on my path is to really observe the mind and where do my thoughts go and where are these thoughts coming from. On my way here, by the way, it was so interesting. I was speaking to a friend, and one thing that I mentioned to her is that if all of your life you grew up in an environment like a toxic pool, right? Let's say you're a fish that grew up in a pool. And suddenly, like, I come and I take that fish out of the water and I put that fish into the sea and I'm putting it back in its natural habitat. The fish will feel like it's not its natural environment. It will want to go back to living inside of the pool water. And it's interesting because you would be like, but that's its natural environment. It should want to be there. But it's to understand that as like you're changing from the inside and you're introspecting and you're recognizing, okay, like I'm conditioned here, I'm conditioned there, or I'm not necessarily moving in a way that's authentic to me. I'm actually following other people or imitating their path, or I think that I need to operate the same way that they do, right? You take away from the services that you're supposed to bring into the world. You're actually feeling all of this frustration that's boiling up. And a lot of the illnesses that we're seeing today, I personally really believe, and this is from my personal experience with chronic illnesses, it's because there's misalignment in your life. There is misalignment between what the soul wants and what the mind is convincing you of. And then there's the body that might be in fight or flight, that is super stimulated and nervous. And to, again, talking about distractions, releasing these distractions out of your life and sitting with the discomfort, because it is going to be an uncomfortable process. And it's not going to be an easy journey necessarily, especially at first when you're learning something new and you're moving from that pool water to the salt water, right? Like moving from one way of being to another, like that is really uncomfortable. However, to state that to the universe, to state that I want to grow, I want to evolve, I do believe that there is another version of me out there that is more in alignment with who she or he is supposed to be, then you allow for life, call it God, call it the universe, to put experiences in your way for those things to take place. And sometimes, yes, those experiences are not going to be pleasant. They're not going to be a walk in the park. It's going to take a lot of courage, a lot of discipline for you to really feel like, okay, I can navigate these choppy waters. I can sit through the fire. I can sit through my thoughts on a daily basis in meditation or journal or whatever it may be that allows you to really investigate the landscape of your mind. Because how many of us actually observe what is taking place inside of our minds, and how is that dictating our reality? It takes one change in a belief system, like just one reframe in your belief, a whole different rewiring taking place in your brain for you to see results in your life, for you to see that actually there has been so much growth and there has been so many changes, and that your reality is now reflecting back to you something totally different than it was before. And that's where you also know, okay, like I do see the changes, and these changes are exciting, and I want to see where else I can go, and whether I have faith in life that if I am to play big, if I am to bet on myself, right? It's like betting on yourself. Can you bet on yourself to be all that you came here to be, to go for all that you've come here for, without feeling like if it doesn't work out right away, then it's a failure, or if it's not necessarily unfolding in the way that you want to, then that means that there is a different path for you to take, that it's not necessarily a rejection, but a redirection. And a lot of people struggle with that, right? It's like, can I see the experiences coming into my life as an opportunity to redirect, right? As an opportunity to shift and to pivot and to move in a different direction. How many people actually try to knock on doors that don't want to open, or to bang their heads against a wall, even though they are so tired and they're so depleted and they feel completely misaligned? So at the beginning of the episode, I kind of mentioned as well, like my journey with human design over the last 2 years. There's been so much change in my life thanks to this tool, and it's such an empowering system. And what I have to say about human design as well is that it just gives you this language and this permission slip to actually come and do what you've come here to do. So I'll give you like examples as well, like on my own personal journey. I used to struggle a lot with public speaking and speaking in general, not just even publicly. I remember I wrote a post once, and this was ages ago, on how I felt like I was the Little Mermaid. And it was like, I just didn't have a voice. I couldn't speak. I couldn't express myself. The conditioning ran so deep, and I thought so many different things about my voice, about my worth, about my capabilities, about what I knew, what I didn't know. And all of those different things, honestly, they stopped me from feeling like I could speak up. And then, interestingly, it was through yoga and meditation and a lot of introspection that I came to realize that speaking was one of my powers, that I came here to be a powerful communicator. And I remember when you start to seek a lot of things outside of you. So I went to so many different healers and practitioners and people to give me advice on what I'm supposed to do and how I'm supposed to live my life, because I felt really lost. I was in the space of working corporate, not knowing what I love to do, not feeling like I knew enough, feeling like everyone else had it figured out except for me. And when I would go and see these people, they all would tell me like very similar things. And they were always like, well, you're supposed to be a communicator. And I would look at them like they lost the plot. I'm like, do you know who I am? Like, have you seen me speak? Have you seen me share? Like, this is literally my biggest block in life. And navigating that journey was really, really interesting. And I'm sure that I will look back 10 years from now to today and be like, wow, like there's also been so many changes, and to be inspired, right? So I would say that to hold the vision of who you know yourself to be. So as all of these people who didn't know each other started to tell me the same thing, and as I was going on my healing journey, I started to realize, wait, actually, I'm feeling this within myself. Like there is truth. Like I do want to share. I do want to speak. I do like to write. I like to share my writings with people. as I was starting to realize that I was actually just super conditioned to fear my own voice, or to fear my power, really, or to feel like I was unworthy. When I started to work on those elements, speaking became very natural. It was a natural byproduct of all of the internal changes that I mentioned, right? It was like, it wasn't me forcing the speaking to happen. It wasn't necessarily like doing certain things from the outside in order for me to really embody that. It was more like all of the things I did inside of myself that then allowed me to feel a lot more confident in speaking, and speaking my truth, and not shying away from sharing those things. Now, when we think about our conditioning can come from so many different places. Our conditioning can come from our own upbringing, so our direct experience with life, growing up in a certain environment, having certain parents, going to a certain school, living in a certain country. Like, there's a lot of conditioning that can happen through our direct experience with life. There is also conditioning that can happen because it's been passed down through your bloodline. So it's not just your own direct experience, it's actually through your family's lineage, like your ancestors, and to begin to understand that you're a byproduct of your ancestors, right? You wouldn't be here if it weren't for them. So, what was their journey like? What were they taught to believe about themselves and their power and their capabilities? And did they have certain gifts and talents that they didn't get to explore? Because I personally believe that these things are transferred to you in order for you to explore it for them. And when you do that, I sense, at least from my own experience, that you would really, really liberate them. And they also then increase in consciousness, and they then become like these really powerful guides that you can have on your journey, on your path. So I mentioned like direct experience, I mentioned bloodline, then obviously there's the whole collective, right? There are certain conditionings that we believe as a whole about ourselves, about our power, and how powerful we came here to be, and also how worth really is something that we don't have to work for. And it's so interesting because a lot of people think that they need to work in order to be worthy, and that they correlate their productivity and their worth together. And this is such a crazy concept because, again, like, we didn't necessarily come here to do all of this work that actually isn't even in alignment with what we've come here to do in that sense, right? Like, there's services, yes, of course, that needs us to put in work, and but when the work comes from the conditioning, I feel like it actually takes away from the purity of our offerings. But with correlating your worth and your productivity together, a lot of people then feel like, I am worthy when I do 20 things on my to-do list every single day. And then if they do 5 things that day, then they're unworthy, or they don't feel as good in their skin, or they feel like they did something wrong, and why are they lazy, and why aren't they operating in a different way, and how is everybody like moving at a faster pace than them, and they beat themselves up, right? I mean, for me, thinking about this podcast as well, like, I had everything set up. I had done my podcast for 3 years, and I had always managed to find people to interview, and I always found the time to do it. And then suddenly there was other things that took priority. And I kept thinking, like, am I letting go of something that really means a lot to me? But instead of putting that extra pressure and that tension on myself to do something that just, it wasn't the time for it then. And it very much feels like it's the time for it right now, which is why I am here sharing this with you. So there is nothing you need to do to prove that you're worthy. There is nothing that you need to prove to anyone else about who you are. A lot of people struggle with that because the way that our society is conditioned is that we have hierarchies in our society. We have people that are looked up at, right? You know, whether it's celebrities, whether it's politicians, whoever it may be that we just like put on a pedestal or we believe just has more worth than we do. And so when we come into their presence, suddenly there's this discomfort because you suddenly feel like I'm not as worthy as this person. It could be I don't have as much money as this person. I'm not like as well dressed as this person. I don't have as much knowledge as this person. This person is way more beautiful than I am, way more confident than I am. Like there's all of these things that can run in a person's energy when they start to encounter different people, and then they allow other people to determine whether they're worthy or not, because there's this comparison. And again, it's super subconscious. You're not aware that you're doing this. You're not aware that when you're encountering people that there's this mechanism taking place that is acknowledged, that is literally feeling like, oh wait, I'm not as worthy, or what do I need to do in order to feel as worthy as XYZ? And sometimes, by the way, it's not even in comparison to anybody else, but it's even in comparison to yourself. So what I want to share with you as well is like, again, as you take that leap of faith to move from one way of being to another, and that is such a beautiful intention to have, instead of feeling demotivated or unworthy, right? That there is such a long way to go between who you are today and who you want to be inspired by that version, to allow yourself to remember that you are already that higher self in this present moment. And of course, there's going to be more horizons for you to discover and uncover, because your worth is actually limitless. There is no end to how worthy you are. And that is, for me, that was a game changer on my journey for the last 2 years, because I was like, wait a minute, like, not only am I worthy just for being myself, not needing to prove myself, but my worth knows no end. Like, I'm unlimitedly worthy, like it's limitless. And every day I can experience new levels of worth that I might have not experienced the day before. Like, to keep that open and not to put any barriers around how worthy you are is super empowering. It allows you to really realize, well, okay, it's not so much that I wasn't worthy before becoming this version of me today. It's more so that I've come in contact with new feelings and new experiences and new information that is really allowing me to embody all that I came here to embody. And interestingly, with everything that I'm sharing with you right now, it's like, yes, there are so many different versions of you. So in this moment, of course, there is that inner child within me that is like, oh, wait a minute, like, what is she doing? How is she talking? How are these things happening? How is she here? And that narrative could be there, but I have to say it's like very minimal in comparison to the past. The fact that I don't even have like a script in front of me, like that would have taken so much, I wouldn't have believed it back in the past. So there's that inner child. Then there's the inner teenager that really felt left out, like an outsider, I don't belong. All of that narrative around feeling separated from others, feeling like I wasn't necessarily as smart as other people, or at least questioning my knowing or my intuition. And then there's like so many different versions of me right now in this moment. The past ones, and if you want to entertain past lives, there's also past lives right here as well. But then there's also like who you are going to be, not just like tomorrow or like a year from now or like 10 years from now, but like who are you here to be like 100 years from now? Like, can you see how much potential there is? Like, if you realize that in this moment right now, you contain all of these versions, past, present, and future, then there's this sigh of relief, of acceptance that everything is as it should be for you. And there's this trust that whenever you need to go through that portal of what we're going to call like death, then you're going to go through it. And instead of freaking out that you're going through the dark night of the soul, or you're freaking out because things are collapsing around you and things are not making any sense, you somehow soften even more because you trust that the rise is going to be so much greater, right? It's like, okay, you're going to go all the way to the depths of hell so that you can reach towards the heavens. And this is where a lot of shadow work can come into play and help you out and guide you. And I always find like examples being super useful because with shadow work, it's interesting. It's things about you that you don't want to accept in yourself, that you don't want to acknowledge, that you kind of want to put aside and repress and ignore and be like, no, like me, I'm not someone that compares. I'm not someone that judges. I'm not someone that is jealous. Like, I don't do these things, only to come to realize that actually you could very well be doing these things, and it might not be the version of you today, but it could be that inner child that I mentioned that is really playing out in this moment. So I mentioned when I was younger, I always doubted what I knew. And I always doubted how much I knew and whether I knew enough or that it was right. And if someone were to ask me a question about a certain topic, I would freak out if I had to say things like, I don't know. So when I moved from corporate and I started to coach, it took me 2 years to announce that I was a coach because I got stuck in studying and taking so many courses and enrolling in so many different things and different modalities because I just felt like I didn't know enough. And I got stuck in that loop and that pattern. And it's so fascinating because that was discovered not only through my human design chart, but again, I had done something called like a soul contract reading. And he had picked up on that. He's like, one of your patterns is that you feel like you don't know enough. Now, interestingly, I've obviously worked through this because I do put myself in positions nowadays where I might not necessarily have the answer, but I'm so much more comfortable and at ease saying things like, I don't know. And but sometimes what happens is that like that version does come out, like that version of me that did feel like she didn't know enough does come out. And I'll give an example. I was like having breakfast with two girls and we were all talking about what we do and all of the courses that we've done. And one of the girls was talking about like all of these different courses that she's enrolled in and all of the different certifications that she has. And I was like, wow, like it's so interesting. But what started to come up to the surface was this version of me that was like, oh my God, maybe I need to go enroll in another course. Maybe I don't know enough. Maybe my clients need me to know this as well, because then I have more to offer them because it's not enough. So again, all tied to and rooted to feeling unworthy, right? And not knowing enough. So I could notice that narrative like really coming up to the surface. And with that higher level of awareness, instead of getting caught in the story or feeling like, oh my God, maybe I don't know or I should be doing or whatever, I literally zoomed out just for a moment and I saw myself as that being that contains all of it, right? That is not just me today, but the me in the past and the me in the future with all of her gifts and talents and unlimited worth. And I saw that version of me that just needed to be acknowledged and accepted. And the second I did that, so it's like you see it kind of like an avatar outside of yourself, like this energy outside of yourself just for visual purposes. And you're like, oh, okay, like, hey, how are you? Like, you're here. And then, like, are you going to, like, control the way that I'm going to show up right now? Are you going to stop me from sharing my thoughts and my opinions about the situation? Or am I going to actually just be present? Instead of so self-conscious about myself, can I just be present and relax and enjoy the conversation that's taking place and learn a thing or two from this person and keep my mind open? And then when the person finished talking, naturally I had a response to share. And I shared this exact story about how we can get stuck in the loop of always studying, and that had happened to me. And I was very honest about how this was a loop that I found really difficult to come out of. And then interestingly, she really resonated with it. And she was like, yeah, like I do that. That's why I've done all of these courses, because I feel like I don't know enough and I want to go deeply into so many things. And it's a beautiful thing to want to do. And I feel like it's so important to have like such a strong foundation as well, to feel secure in your knowing and your knowledge and your wisdom. And then at the same time, to trust in yourself that you have the capacity to share. And even though you might feel like, oh, wait, you know what? Like everybody knows this, to remember that actually not everybody knows this. And that there is going to be so many things that you can teach others, and at the same time to remain teachable. So I'm excited to share with you more things throughout this journey together, with the different topics we're going to discuss around shadow work, conditioning, breaking free from your patterns, as well as human design. And I'm excited also to bring along guests to ask them about their spiritual journeys. So thank you for being here with me today, and I hope to see you soon and speak to you soon. All good?